Iraq's 1991 defeat by a US-led coalition set in motion a series of events which would ultimately lead to another US invasion in 2003. But this new invasion was not just a continuation of 1991. New leaders, revived disputes, and the shock of the 9/11 terrorist attacks all result in one of recent history's most controversial wars. So why did the US invade Iraq again? After the end of the Gulf War in February 1991, the United Nations Security Council adopts Resolution 687. It requires that Iraq pay reparations, destroy all chemical and biological weapons and missiles, and not pursue nuclear weapons. Together, these weapons are called Weapons of Mass Destruction, or WMDs. The UN imposes economic and military sanctions until Iraq complies with the resolution. During the Gulf War, Saddam gave orders to prepare chemical and biological weapons, including 1,200 chemical aircraft bombs, 13,000 gas artillery shells, 8,320 Grad rockets loaded with nerve agents, and 25 biological weapon rockets. Coalition troops trained to fight on a chemical battlefield.
We've never been put into a position where we've actually had to go into combat in a chemical environment before, so this is all new to us. We've got new equipment, newer style gas masks. We train, we practice, we go through the gas chambers, but we've never really applied ourselves as a combat unit.
Facing bullets is one thing, the facing chemical gas, and the threat of it is another. It just seems like they're cheating.
But Saddam does not use these weapons, although he previously did in the Iran-Iraq War and against rebel groups within Iraq, including civilians. After 1991, UN inspectors also uncover a former Iraqi uranium enrichment program. Some in Washington, including President George H.W. Bush, want to depose Saddam, but many countries oppose this. So Bush seeks to withdraw troops and create a post-Cold War system based on international cooperation.
But I would repeat here, I do not want to send out the impression that U.S. troops will be permanently stationed in the Gulf. I want them back. So we're still working, we're just beginning to work out these security arrangements, but a part of it will not be a continued presence of substantial quantities of U.S. troops. I'd like to see them all out of there as soon as possible, but there's some shorter run security problems that I don't want to underestimate.
But the US and some allies are still militarily involved. They airdrop aid and create 2 no-fly zones to protect suppressed Kurdish groups in the north and Shia tribes in the south. Saddam's repression isolates Iraq, and sanctions bar selling oil or importing industrial and medical equipment which could have military uses. Agriculture and health suffer, causing up to 500,000 Iraqis to die of disease and malnutrition. Some experts, though, argue these figures are exaggerated or exacerbated by Iraqi actions in order to gain sympathy. Iraq claims to destroy all WMDs, but inspectors cannot confirm this, and they complain of poor cooperation and potential deception. So UN sanctions continue during President Bill Clinton's policy of containment, although an oil for food program allows Iraq to sell some oil. In 1998, UN inspectors request to search off-limits areas like presidential palaces. Saddam refuses and accuses the inspectors of cooperating with US and Israeli intelligence, and in some cases, this is true. Saddam expels the inspectors, triggering a US and British military response known as Operation Desert Fox. In December 1998, US and UK forces hit suspected Iraqi weapons facilities with 600 bombs and 415 cruise missiles. Clinton also signs the Iraq Liberation Act, providing support for exiled opposition groups.
So long as Saddam remains in power, he will remain a threat to his people, his region, and the world. With our allies, we must pursue a strategy to contain him and to constrain his weapons of mass destruction program. While working toward the day, Iraq has a government willing to live at peace with its people and with its neighbors.
Russia, France, China, and some Arab nations condemn the attack. Russia, China, and France want to reduce sanctions, probably because they want lucrative oil concessions. Some Iraqi neighbors, like Jordan and Turkey, also smuggle Iraqi oil. By 2000, Iraq is arguably recovering, with oil sales doubling GDP per capita between 1997 and 2000. The CIA concludes Saddam is secure against internal threats and that he's rehabilitating his international standing. In January 2001, George W. Bush, son of former President George H.W. Bush, becomes president. His campaign focused on domestic issues, but this all changes on September 11, 2001. The 9/11 terrorist attacks forced the Bush administration into action. US intelligence identifies terrorist organization Al-Qaeda, led by exiled Saudi Osama bin Laden, as responsible. In the 1990s, Al-Qaeda had launched attacks against US interests to protest US support for Israel and military presence in Saudi Arabia. In October 2001, US forces invade Afghanistan, where bin Laden lives. The US administration also links Al-Qaeda to Iraq. The 9/11 attack was much more sophisticated than earlier bombings, causing some to suspect state sponsorship. Although Bush never explicitly says Iraq is directly responsible for 9/11, US officials point to Iraq's WMD history, claiming Iraq could provide terrorists with devastating weapons. It's a powerful argument in the post-9/11 environment of American insecurity and anthrax attacks. In January 2002, Bush calls out a so-called axis of evil.
North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. This is a regime that has already used poison gas to murder thousands of its own citizens, leaving the bodies of mothers huddled over their dead children.
Bush's approval rating reaches 90%, the highest ever recorded. But US intelligence struggles to link Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden. The CIA claims Iraqi government links to Iraq-based Al-Qaeda operative Abu Musab al-Zarqawi and 9/11 plotter Mohammed Atta, but evidence is weak. Instead, experts conclude Al-Qaeda and Iraq are generally opposed. Bin Laden, for example, declared Iraq as heretical for its secularism. Others claim Saddam is a rational actor who doesn't want to attack America. Professor Adam Cobb is among the critics. The president and others have repeatedly said that Saddam could hand over WMD to Al-Qaeda. It is certainly technically possible, but they have never provided more than vague innuendo to suggest what incentives Saddam might gain from doing so. This is because the proposition does not bear scrutiny. Some government figures later retract statements linking Iraq to 9/11, but in October 2002, 66% of Americans believe Iraq assisted the attack. The same month, US Congress authorizes force against Iraq, with 97% of Republican and 57% of Democrat senators voting in favor. There are many reasons the US invades Iraq in 2003, but the key elements include an acute sense of danger, neoconservative opportunism, Bush's presidency, and Iraqi miscalculations. Iraqi possession or pursuit of WMDs forms the central US argument. The US claims Iraq breached the 1991 ceasefire after expelling inspectors in 1998 and may hand WMDs to terrorists. Many countries in Europe and the Middle East are also concerned about Iraqi WMDs. So British Prime Minister Tony Blair and US Secretary of State Colin Powell encouraged Bush to take a diplomatic approach via the UN. In November 2002, the UN Security Council unanimously passes Resolution 1441 under US pressure, demanding the return of weapon inspectors. Importantly, the resolution does not allow for the use of force and gives Saddam a final opportunity to comply. Saddam accepts, and UN and International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors, led by Hans Blix and Mohammed El-Baradei, return. They often visit sites based on US intelligence, but find no WMDs. Could there be 100% certainty about the existence of weapons of mass destruction, but 0% knowledge about their location? The CIA did not see 9/11 coming. so it's under pressure to find Iraqi WMDs and prevent another potentially more devastating attack. Intelligence figures do not fabricate evidence, but they are affected by political priorities, media pressure, and public fears, meaning they give more weight to evidence linking Iraq and WMDs than evidence to the contrary. Much of the intel they focus on is faulty, especially from Iraqi exiles who want to remove Saddam or seek personal gain. One important Germany-based asset, Rafid Ahmed Alman, also known as Curveball, provides detailed information on supposed mobile biological weapons labs. German intelligence doubts the story, but the CIA accepts it. As Blix explains, it's hard to disprove something exists. The mobile bioweapon production units have become a big ticket. Some have told me that the information is not all that solid. Without evidence, how do we know? I was asked in the council whether it was plausible, and I said yes. After all, we are told that the Russians did it in rail cars. But it is strange that no satellite pictures or other pictures were taken, only human stories. The US also ignores expert skepticism and accepts British claims that Iraq bought uranium from Niger. The documents related to the case are later shown to be frauds. Although some US intelligence officials insist that much of the intel can't yet be confirmed, government officials publicly release it anyway. The US intelligence community is also fragmented. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Douglas Feith establishes a rival intelligence subgroup within the Pentagon which aggressively promotes evidence of Iraqi WMDs. The CIA develops a national intelligence estimate reinforcing many WMD claims. It says there is no link between Saddam and al-Qaeda, but also suggests Saddam could forge one if he wanted to. On February 5, 2003, Powell presents US findings to the UN Security Council. His presentation includes much of the under-verified information, like the mobile labs, and shows photograph captions more certain than the evidence allows. The US administration and media celebrate the presentation as a smoking gun, especially intercepted conversations like this one.
إبراهيم رفع عبارة عوامل الأعصاب أينما وردت في التعليمات اللاسلكية زيني صارتي.
However, the international observers and experts like Blix are not convinced. Our analysts felt they were not impressed by Powell's presentation, and even less by the intelligence we have been acting on. No one will give Iraq the benefit of the doubt, but it is hard for any outsider to feel that the intelligence provided has weighed heavily. Although insecurity undoubtedly influenced US policy, some academics argue neoconservative opportunism drives American action. This argument focuses on officials like Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, his deputy Paul Wolfowitz, and advisor Richard Perle. They're supported by think tanks and academics who develop an ideology of unilateral American military intervention to directly support US economic and strategic interests. Some neoconservatives oppose the 1990s containment strategy, support exiled Iraqi opposition, and advocate Saddam's removal. They claim multilateral cooperation with allies hindered US actions in Kosovo and elsewhere, undermining American credibility. Influential think tank Project for the New American Century even suggests before 9/11 that an event like a, quote, new Pearl Harbor could galvanize American military rearmament and dominance. Some therefore argue that 9/11 is an opportunity to set up a pro-US Iraqi client state and promote Israeli interests, which many neocons firmly support. Some State Department diplomats oppose the neoconservatives and persuade Bush to seek another UN resolution. But initial success in Afghanistan and widespread public and political support reinforces the pro-war neoconservative position, which claims Iraqi ceasefire breaches authorize US military action. Some also argue that oil plays a role. Iraq has around 60% of known oil reserves at the time and is much cheaper than US-produced oil. US reliance on Middle Eastern oil has also increased from 8% in 1985 to 21% in 2001. Some critics claim neoconservatives want to use American military power to maintain unsustainable oil consumption at home. Other critics say the US priority is preventing French, Russian, or Chinese access to Iraqi oil reserves. Academics also argue neoconservatives promote a militarized, unilateral form of liberal democracy. Bush adds democratizing Iraq as a justification for the war, but this is not very persuasive for the American public. Even so, neoconservatives hope democracy can revolutionize the region, aid Israel, allow the US to withdraw troops from Saudi Arabia, and improve US security. They also assume advanced weapons and a grateful population will make regime change relatively low cost, as Cheney explains in 2002. We have great information. They're going to welcome us. It will be like the American army going through the streets of Paris. They're sitting there ready to form a new government. The people will be so happy with their freedoms that we'll probably back ourselves out of there within a month or two. There are political scientists who counter-argue that the neoconservatives were not so influential. Frank Harvey argues that many Americans from across the political spectrum promoted regime change. He says Democrats like Bill Clinton and Al Gore supported regime change and would also have invaded had they been in power post 9/11. Some writers also suggest that critics of the neoconservatives are actually trying to retroactively mask their own support for the war. Neoconservative writer Robert Kagan agrees. Prominent intellectuals, both liberal and conservative, have turned on their friends and allies in an effort to avoid opprobrium for a war they publicly supported. Politicians have twisted themselves into pretzels to explain away their support for the war, or better still, to blame someone else for persuading them to support it. An extension of the neoconservative argument also claims Bush oversees a shift in US doctrine which dooms international cooperation and made invasion of Iraq more likely. The idea of the Bush doctrine focuses on so-called preventive war, attacking an opponent before they can gain the means to potentially attack you. The US claims the right to attack Iraq based on previous treaty violations, even if Iraq was only seeking to develop WMDs without yet having them. In a 2002 speech, Bush claims older strategies of deterrence no longer apply. For much of the last century, America's defense relied on the Cold War doctrines of deterrence and containment. But new threats also require new thinking. Deterrence means nothing against shadowy terrorist networks with no nation or citizens to defend. Containment is not possible when unbalanced dictators with weapons of mass destruction can deliver those weapons on missiles or secretly provide them to terrorist allies. Some commentators claim the Bush doctrine is a radical departure from a post-Cold War rules-based system anchored around international organizations like the UN. Although Bush wanted UN resolutions to appease allies, he always maintained the right to act unilaterally. Others highlight an element of ideological and religious righteousness to his international interventionism. Opponents of this view argue the UN-based consensus system was already deteriorating before the Iraq War, and the Bush doctrine is not a fundamental departure from previous US policy. They see Clinton's 1998 Operation Desert Fox as an example of preventive war. Others, like Christian Alfonsi, argue Bush's personal history is more relevant than his political views, especially Saddam's attempt to assassinate his father in 1993. This fixation on Saddam ran through the Bush dynasty like a malignant strain of DNA, a pathogen always a threat to appear under the right conditions of crisis. But the US alone did not dictate events, since Iraqi actions also played a role. It's now known Iraq destroyed its WMDs before 2003, so why didn't it just say so? Part of it comes down to Saddam's distrust of the weapons inspectors. Iraq provides information on WMD disarmament in 1991 and expects sanctions to be lifted. But the information is insufficient by UN standards, so the sanctions stay. Some experts suggest Saddam, who's a convinced anti-Semite, suspects a US-Israeli conspiracy, a belief reinforced when some UN inspectors pass information to US and Israeli intelligence. As a result, Iraq destroys documents cataloging its disarmament, which will be a problem for later inspectors. In 1992, Saddam concluded Iraqi cooperation achieves little. One of the mistakes some people make is that when the enemy has decided to hurt you, you believe there is a chance to decrease the harm by acting in a certain way. I have given them everything, the missiles and the chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. They didn't give us anything in exchange. Well, they have become worse. By 1998, Iraqi officials claimed the inspections are a cover for other US and British intentions.
Why should they continue this rhetoric about the possibility of concealment of chemical or biological weapons? This does not serve the purpose of disarmament. It serves the purpose of the aggressive policy of Washington and London. So it is not a United Nations purpose. It's another purpose, which is part of the policy of two member states in the Security Council who would like to hurt Iraq politically, economically, by all means, including the use of force.
Instead, some argue Saddam adopts a deterrence strategy based on purposeful WMD ambiguity to deter his main threats, Iran, Israel, and his internal opponents. Frustrating UN weapons inspectors helps maintain credible ambiguity, while sharing information may expose Iraqi scientists and facilities to attack. This fear is based on past experiences. Iran and Iraq continue low-intensity conflict, Israel bombed the Iraqi Osirak nuclear reactor in 1981, and likely assassinated Iraqi scientists. After his 2003 capture, Saddam explains to interrogator George Pirro, "You in America do not see the world that confronts Iraq. I must defend the Arab nation against the Persians and Israelis. The Persians have attacked regularly. They send missiles and infiltrations against us. If they believe we are weak, they will attack. And it is well known that both the Israelis and Persians have nuclear bombs and chemical bombs and biological weapons." Saddam also probably believes WMD ambiguity deters the US, which he thinks fears high casualties. Until March 2003, he also thinks any US military action will be like Operation Desert Fox, which his regime survived and arguably benefited from domestically. Standing up to the US internationally also might increase his standing with Arab powers. As a result, some experts conclude Saddam greatly miscalculates 9/11's impact on US attitudes. A 2002 US poll reveals 77% favor war to destroy Iraqi WMDs, with 56% supporting invasion, even if the US suffers thousands of casualties. But Saddam remains focused on historical threats and continues to believe Cold War-style deterrence limits US actions, when in fact WMD ambiguity may actually be provoking them. Saddam's half-brother writes in his diary, "Saddam in his public or private life uses the edge of the abyss policy. The method is similar to playing Russian roulette. This is his mentality and his management style." He later states, "I've tried time and again to get my brother to understand that the world has changed, and that we will be internationally completely sidelined if we can't find a solution that we, the Americans, and the Israelis can live with. But I might as well be talking to the wall." Iraq's Deputy Prime Minister Tariq Aziz later tells interrogators Saddam was skilled at handling internal issues, but ignorant of international relations. He also claims Saddam's belief, including his confidence in his own armed forces, largely came from sycophantic advisors seeking favors. Whatever the reason, poor Iraqi cooperation means that by early 2003, Hans Blix cannot confirm Iraqi compliance, even though he has not found any WMDs.
Well, I'm not catering for anybody, neither for Bush or for the Iraqis or for the UK or Moscow. I'm catering for the Security Council. We serve the whole Security Council, and I'm trying to tell the truth, such as it is. There are some good things to say about what the Iraqis have done. I think they have a decision that they will meet us on procedure, and I do not quite see determination yet to try to clear up the many questions of the past.
Only in February 2003, after pressure from Russia, does Saddam improve cooperation, including destroying some banned conventional missiles. By now, though, Bush has formed a multinational coalition of the willing supporting an invasion, although most do not commit troops. The UK provides the second biggest armed contribution, followed by Australia and Poland. But most of the world opposes an invasion. Russia, China, and France make it clear they will veto any further UN resolution. US public opinion is in favor, but in some other coalition members, support is much lower. In mid-February, arguably the largest wave of global protests in history opposed the war as some 35 million people take to the streets in 90 countries. Hans Blix developed specific criteria to confirm Iraqi compliance and says he can implement his plan by April, a proposal many states support. Colin Powell, however, says it will take too long. US military priorities take over, since if it wants to invade, it must do so before the summer heat or risk keeping its massive troops in Kuwait even longer. Unlike in the 1991 war, US troops expect to fight in urban environments like Baghdad.
This is close quarters combat here. Three-dimensional fight, you have basements, you have 3, 4, 5-story buildings, you have furniture that's involved when you go in and clear, you have civilians on the battlefield, you have cars in the way. I mean, all the stuff that comes with a place like New York City, like Frankfurt, like London, you have to deal with all that stuff.
On March 17, 2003, Bush gives Saddam and his sons 48 hours to leave Iraq, or the coalition will invade. Saddam refuses, and on March 20th, airstrikes target Baghdad and coalition troops invade Iraq. But as US-led forces advance, most do not race to secure suspected WMD sites. Instead, US tanks rush for Baghdad with the aim of finishing the job started in 1991, eliminating Saddam Hussein's Iraq. Saddam counted on a patriotic uprising by the Iraqi population against the foreign invaders. His family was to play a crucial role in rallying them to fight the Americans. Saddam's sons Qusay and Uday Hussein eventually died in an hour-long firefight against American troops in Mosul in late July 2003. Uday's life as potential heir to Saddam had been marked by violence and cruelty. If you want to learn more about the life of Uday Hussein, you should check out the new series Mad Kings by Real Life Lore. And where can you watch Mad Kings? On Nebula, a streaming service we're building with other creators where you don't need to sift through a deluge of AI slop. Nebula is made and curated by humans, and it's available in 4K resolution on your browser, on your smartphone, smart TV, or streaming box like Apple TV or Roku. And that's not all. On Nebula, you can also watch all our regular videos ad-free and earlier than on YouTube. And all that for just $36 for an entire year if you go to nebula.tv/realtimehistory. Right now, you can also get the Nebula Lifetime membership. Pay once and get access to everything Nebula has to offer for as long as you and Nebula exist. If you go to nebula.tv/realtimehistory, you can save $200 on the regular price. The Lifetime membership allows us to invest in more original content and improve the platform for everyone. 1/3 of your Lifetime membership will also support us at Real Time History directly. To learn more about the Gulf War and the Iran-Iraq War, which were crucial events before the 2003 invasion of Iraq, check out our previous videos. As usual, you can find all the sources for this video in the description below. If you're watching this video on Patreon or Nebula, thank you so much for the support. We couldn't do it without you. I'm Jesse Alexander, and this is a production of Real Time History, the only history channel with historically accurate PowerPoint presentations.